Hello, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Oestreich, and today we will begin Chapter 9 of our Go Math lessons. Chapter 9 is relating fraction and decimals, and we will begin today on page 495. Our essential question is, how can you record tenths as fractions and decimals? Okay. Now, a decimal is smaller than 1, just like a fraction is smaller than 1. You can write a fraction and a fraction and a decimal in two different ways. If you're going to write it as a decimal, you have to use the decimal point. So this is $5.15. That's how you write it, $5.15. It's less than $1, so that's where the decimal comes in. You would not write it in a store as $5.15. They both mean the same, but you would write money with decimals. Okay, let's go on. Unlock the problem. Ty is reading a book about metamorphic rocks. He has read 7/10 of the book. What decimal describes the part of the book Ty has read? So right here, 7/10 is as a fraction. A decimal is a number with one or more digits to the right of the decimal point. You can write tenths and hundredths as fractions or decimals. Okay, so it's the same number, we're just writing it two different ways. So, shade 7/10 of the model. The model is divided into 10 equal parts. Each part represents 1/10. So here we have 7/10. So we're going to shade in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're going to shade in this whole part. And you should be doing this in your Go Math book. Okay, this whole part is shaded in. So now let's write it. 7/10. Okay. Now we can use that same number and write it as a decimal. When you're writing decimals, everything to the right of the decimal point is tenths. It's smaller than 1. To the left of the decimal point, you have ones, you have tens, you have hundreds, you have thousands. But to the right of the decimal point, just remember there's no ones. There's just tenths, hundredths, thousands. So let's write 7/10 is 7/10. So there's 0 ones and there's 7/10. So write 7/10. 0.7. 0 ones and 7/10. And you read it the same way as this. So you can just write that in right here. Okay, let's go down. There's another way. Use a number line to compare the decimal and the fraction. So right now, 0/10 is written as 0.0. 1/10 is written as 0.1. The 1 is in the tenths place. 2/10 is written as 0.2. 3/10 is written as 0.3. 4/10 is written as 0.4. 5/10 is written as 0.5. There's no whole number. There's just a fraction here. 6/10, 0.6. 7/10 0.7, 8/10 0.8, 9/10 0.9. 10/10 is written as 1 because we know 10/10 is equal to 1. When your numerator and your denominator are the same number, it equals 1. So 0.7 names the same amount as 7/10. Okay, let's go down. How can you write 0.1 as a fraction? This is in the place value tenths. So you can write it as, you can write it as as 1/10. Explain. 1/10 is the same as 0.1. The 1 is in the tenths column. Okay, let's go to the next page. Tara rode her bicycle 1 6/10 mile. So she rode it 1 mile and 6/10 of a mile. What decimal describes how far she rode her bicycle? You've already written a fraction as a decimal. You can also write a mixed number as a decimal. One way, use a model and a place value chart. Let's start with the model. Shade 1 6/10. So we're going to shade in one hole, which is this entire thing, because this is one hole. This is 10/10, and 6/10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to shade in 6/10. So let's write it as a fraction, 1 6/10 as a fraction, or as a decimal, 1.6, because that 6 is in the tenths column. Okay. Let's use the place value chart to write 1 6/10. It's a 1 whole and 6/10. So in the ones column, we have to put the whole number 1, decimal point, and in the tenths column, 6. So let's write it as 1.6, 1 6/10, and you read it the same way. You can write that in. 1 6/10. They both read the same. They both mean the same. They're just written differently. You can also go on and use a number line. Okay, this is 1 0/10, 1 1/10, 1 2/10, 1 3/10, 1 4/10. And this is 1 1/10, 1 point, 1.2/10, 1.3/10, 1.4/10, and you can go on and on. 1 5/10, 1 6/10, 1 4/10, 1 5/10, and 1 6/10. Let me just write this into 1 5/10. And this would be 1 7/10, 1 8/10, 1 9/10. This would be 1 10/10. And we know that 10/10 is equal to 1, so that equals 2. Or 2 0/10, which you don't have to write. You don't have to write 0/10. There's nothing, there's no tenths in that, so you can leave it just as 2. Okay? So, what names the same amount as 1 6/10? 1.6. So Tara rode her bicycle 1.6 of a mile. Okay, easy enough. Write 5/10 as a fraction and as a decimal. 5/10. We have 0 wholes, 0.5. Oh, as a fraction, sorry. 5/10. And now write it as a decimal, 0 whole numbers, and 5 in your 10th place value. 0 ones, 0.5 is in the tenths. 5/10 is equal to 0.5. Write the fraction and mixed number and the decimal shown. Okay, we have 1 whole, we have 2 wholes. So our whole number is 2. And what do we have here? 1, 2 shaded in. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 2 and 2/10. That's written as a mixed number. You could also write it as 2 as a decimal and 2/10. Okay, and the same thing here. The dot is here. So let's figure that out. This is 0/10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10. So let's write it as a fraction, 8/10. And now let's write it as a decimal. 0 whole numbers and 8 is in the tenths place. Okay. So now on your own, you will be answering these questions. They will be coming up next in this assignment. Okay.